Right, touche. That was good. Thanks for being in the front here.
Hi. Used to come with mic stands.
Right, we used to have mic stands before CPB cut funding. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our first Grand Rapids Issues and Ale of 2025. It's so good to be here, and hello to everyone who is joining us virtually, wherever. Hello, hello, hello. I'm usually we do sort of like a whole spiel of all the things, but you know what? We're just feeling a little loosey-goosey, and we're just going to jump right in. We're going to talk for not too long, maybe a little long, we'll see, and then we totally want to take your questions about all things happening in Michigan politics, in Lansing.
We're going to talk for a while, and then we're going to
go get another
stop
drink
talking
and
for a
come
while,
back
maybe
and
get a beer. Hopefully, you'll come up with some questions, help us fill the time.
Rick Pluta here is the senior Capitol correspondent for the Michigan Public Radio Network. Hello, Rick.
Hello, Zoe. Zoe Clark is the executive poobah of all things politics at Michigan Public.
And we are super happy that Chad Livengood, the politics editor at the Detroit News, is joining us here across the state. Thank you for driving all the way over, Chad.
Happy to be here.
And I know that there is a Detroit mayoral debate happening right now at this very hour. Do you have to edit those stories once we're all done?
I do not. I'm off the hook for that tonight.
Oh, okay. So we're going to get him an extra Oberon then, too, after this. Well, let's start with the fact that it is October 15th, and Lansing government is actually running. The federal government is not. But
we have a budget.
We have a budget. Chad, try to weave the tale of what it has taken Lansing to get this $81 billion budget passed days, a full week after it was meant to.
Well, on the first point, I think there's still some dispute about whether this is a lower budget. I think we're going to find a little bit of recalculation of the numbers. I think it actually comes closer to 84, so the whole notion that they cut the budget is really probably not going to hold water, in part because there was like some pretty big tax increase with the marijuana tax that they hoped to generate $400 million for fixing the damn roads, and then there's a whole lot of other reconfiguration of the way we fund Medicaid, thanks in part to the changes at the federal level through one big beautiful bill act. OBBB Act, and so, but this is to get into the windup. How did we get here? Well, we had divided government, and we have a governor who is effectively a lame duck, but is looking at her legacy and saying, okay, I came in here saying I'm going to fix the damn roads. If anybody has driven on a freeway in the last 3 summers, you know that the governor is fixing some roads.
Can we just do a quick temperature check? Because I have this theory that even without this new money, folks would be like, yeah, the roads are getting, like how many, if you were just asked right now, are the roads getting fixed? Raise your hand. Did we really need this money?
Are your roads getting fixed?
One person said too often.
Anyway, keep going, but we're gonna circle back to this idea of yes, we absolutely have to fix the roads. The industry says some $4 billion a year is needed, but it feels like the vibe right now is folks are like, wow, if anything, the roads are getting fixed.
Let up a little bit off the gas there, Governor, please. But the problem is that if you go look at the data, city streets are just as bad, if not worse, than they were 6-7 years ago, and they're projected to get worse. And right now, the pavement projections for all pavement in Michigan is that you are driving on the best roads you've driven on in 20 years, and this is as good as it's going to get, essentially.
Because we live in Michigan.
But in part because we borrowed $3.5 billion, and I call this the get out the damn credit card approach, is what the governor had to do after she went to the legislature in 2019 and said, okay, to fix our roads, we need a 45-cent per gallon gas tax increase. And she couldn't even get one Democrat to introduce that. And so it went over like a lead balloon in Lansing, went nowhere. And so she, went and borrowed the money. Then the interest rates went up. And because of that, it's going to take 25 years, and we're going to spend $2 billion of interest over 25 years. $3.5 billion of roads will cost your kids and grandkids $25.5 billion. So looking at that, that is costing now the state upwards of nearly $300 million a year in just the principal and interest payment. That is a huge burden been put on MDOT's budget. So Whitmer, you're coming in, you gotta get at least $300 million of new revenue, bare minimum, or you're gonna be blamed for this for a generation, for building out great freeways, widening 75 and 96 and US 23, and I'm not exactly sure if anything.
Those are roads that are on the other side
Yeah,
of the state.
Forgive me.
You
I
may
mean,
or may not
I
be
did,
familiar
I did
with
just
that.
drive 96 through Kent County, and it's obviously it's one of the projects. 196, I believe, all the way out to Holland. That was one of the projects that was early on in this rebuilding Michigan program. But you're going to get blamed for saddling the state with a bunch of debt. So you got to go get a minimum of $300 million. With the marijuana tax, assuming it can raise, and somehow the estimate came out to $420 million on the nose.
True
But
story.
If you can raise 420, you're going to have enough money to pay the bond debt, essentially. And so that is the dynamic that Whitmer walked
We
into.
amuse ourselves.
Yes, Whitmer walked into that dynamic, and then if you're the Republicans, you walked in saying we got to cut waste and fraud and abuse in state government, and they might have done some of that, but it's really hard to tell if they actually got rid of anything. But just to be clear, there is no ghost jobs, as they sort of this notion they've peddled in state government. There are unfilled positions, yes, but it's not some grand conspiracy by state agencies to not fill jobs.
And Rick, some of this was, as Chad said from the very beginning, right? It started off with divided government. We actually haven't seen, in decades, 15 years, two chambers that was Democratic and Republican. So this is some of it, right? So you have a Republican House, you have a Democratic Senate, and you have, as Chad said, a governor who is looking at her legacy. And you have Matt Hall, the new Republican speaker.
Not that new anymore.
Not that new anymore, 10 months, 15 days. Or no, actually, that's not true because he didn't get until January 8th, so 15 minus 8. And he comes in and he's a little Trumpian. And you hear about Doge at the federal government, and Matt Hall says, yeah, you heard Doge. How about Boge? Kid you not, the Republican Speaker of the House, Ann Bolin, for
He named it after, yeah.
is the appropriations chair, and he says it's the Bolin, the Boge. And he is just like dead set on this idea that he is going to cut government. And he really sort of took all of the oxygen out of Lansing in the Matt Hall show for months and months and months while this budget was being negotiated.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was for, like you said, for months and months and months and months, it was Matt Hall's Lansing. That he would hold these press conferences that went on for more than an hour while the governor was largely silent and set up what he was going to do, what he wanted, what House Republicans were going to do, and was just constantly stirring the pot. As a matter of fact, one of the interesting things about the budget deal that just got done was that we sort of knew that they were getting close when House Speaker Matt Hall went quiet.
It's what negotiators will tell you is you actually know you're getting close to a deal when everyone stops being loud and holding 90-minute press conferences.
And then as soon as the budget was done, Matt Hall wasn't as quiet.
So let's go back to one of the ways that we are now fixing the damn roads, which is through this new wholesale tax on marijuana, which will, by estimations, raise $420 million a year. For those folks who listen to the It's Just Politics podcast, last week we had Jen Flutta and the budget director. I pressed her on if that was a real number, and who just came up with like, how close can we get to 420 million? What percentage?
Percentage, yeah.
Right, exactly. And she says, no, it just happened, 24% wholesale tax. So Chad, fill us in a little bit about the controversy around this tax. Not so much just that it's a tax increase, but actually the fact that some are arguing now that it changes what voters wanted in 2018.
Yeah, so voters in 2018 approved recreational marijuana. Of course, going back to 2008 is when we have initially approved medical marijuana. But the 2018 amendment that the voters approved, anytime that the citizens put an initiated law before the rest of the voters and they approve it, then if the legislature wants to tinker with it in any single small way, they have to get a 3/4 vote of both chambers of the legislature in order to override the voters. They did not get 3/4 vote in this tax. Their argument is that, well, this is not changing the current tax. This is creating a new tax layered on top at the wholesale level, which is just, you know, the growers that only grow and sell to retailers. The retailers will have to pay the 24%. In this model, in this sort of very vertical system, the retailer is the grower a lot of the time, depending on the product, but there's a whole lot of products in these marijuana stores. And so the long and short of this is that they're now suing. And they've the
marijuana Industry
retailers.
Association filed a lawsuit in the Michigan Court of Claims.
Yep, and so these big retailers that have a lot of money at stake, that have an industry that is struggling to the point of you know, bankruptcies are occurring in some of these smaller entities, and a lot of them are having a hard time holding on. Like any other industry that's kind of new, there's been a lot of failure and consolidation and changeover, and so they are suing, contending that this should have been required to have the 3/4 vote. Lawmakers will say, no, our lawyers say it's just fine. We just create a new tax on you. You know, shut up and pay, basically, essentially. And then there's an open question about whether this estimate is really true, because you have an industry where the price of marijuana is at a historic low. I mean, I had a relative, I don't want to identify the relative, who came into the state from out of state.
It's just a friend, guys.
And went to
went
to a weed shop in Ann Arbor a couple weeks ago and was just blown away by the price compared to what he used to pay for an eighth on the streets of San Francisco as a kid, and was just like, this can't be true. And I'm in Ann Arbor and I'm paying just this exorbitantly cheap cost, and so there's so much product that's flooded the market that this industry is kind of like teetering on a way oversupply. And so the fear is that you just add this tax on, you're going to push more of it underground. People are going to grow plants again and in their basement. Although anybody who has tried that will tell you, not
any of Chad's friends who
any
have
of my
tried
friends
that.
have told me that is extremely expensive with rising electricity rates. But that's a whole different subject for a different episode of It's Just Politics.
So there's this lawsuit that filed by the industry that says that this state, that the legislature and the governor, by enacting this tax, have run afoul of the state constitution by amending an initiated law without a super majority in the legislature. Now, we don't know what the state's answer is going to be, that they haven't said publicly what they're going to argue. We're still waiting to see the briefs that they file in response to this lawsuit. But we have some idea that one of the arguments will be that this was not an amendment to the marijuana initiative. This is a tax law, not a marijuana law. That the argument will be made about whether or not this substantially changed the marijuana initiative versus whether or not it's a tax law. You can make amendments that don't require supermajorities that affect initiatives, but they have to be something that meets the intent of the initiative, that it's enacting legislation in order to help meet the intent of the initiative. And I think, again, we have not seen the state's response yet, that that's going to be a central question. Was it part of it, and does this actually in some way affect the enacting the intentions of the voter-approved initiative?
And what's so interesting is that the act that probably folks in this room might have voted for or against, literally the act
Or,
is called,
they know someone
a friend,
who have a friend who
the
voted
Marijuana
for
Regulation and Taxation Act. Literally, the word taxation is in the title of the act, and I'm just sort of interested in whether that plays a role in any of the arguments. So it starts in the Court of Claims, Rick Pluta. It will then, in all likelihood, whatever happens, go to the Court of Appeals here in Michigan, and eventually, likely, up to the Michigan Supreme Court. I think we're all sort of assuming.
Well, the point that you made about taxation being in the title of the initiative is one of the things that's mentioned in the lawsuit that challenges it. So it's a significant part of it. And this is what the courts call a matter of first impression, that it hasn't been litigated before. So I would say that it's almost guaranteed to go to the Supreme Court in one, at least it will be appealed to the Supreme Court, and then at that point, the Supreme Court will have to make a decision on whether it liked what happened with the last legal move.
This wholesale tax goes into effect January 1st. We were talking to someone over the weekend who was like, yeah, it's
Not April 20th.
we were talking to someone who was like, yeah, it's going to be crazy to have, to have the Michigan Supreme Court rule on this by January 1st. And I was like, that is comical. They're not going to rule by January 1st, right?
Lucky to rule by January 1st of 2027.
In a few years. I mean, you could certainly ask them, right, to do an expedited decision, but they don't want it to. Like, they're like, we're good, right? So it's, I think much like, as folks have probably followed along with Adopt and Amend, that had to do with the minimum wage here in Michigan, and that the Supreme Court, again, it went through the courts for a while. And so in all likelihood, don't play this tape back if we get it completely wrong, but that January 1st will begin and a new wholesale tax will happen. Meanwhile, you'll continue to hear about this making its way through the
Adopt and Amend
courts.
took 6 years to get through the Supreme Court.
They did it in 2018, and it was just last summer, not this past summer, but the summer of 24. Yeah, that it was, and then the legislature this past year, right, figured out how they were going to fix it.
Well, there is one other possibility, which is that a Court of Claims judge, and this could proceed on its own track, says we're just going to put a pause on the wholesale tax and that revenue for roads until this gets fully litigated or until a higher court, lifts an injunction.
We should know that, this is the one big tax increase in the deal. And the whole road funding plan, they say it's about 1.8 billion, but they're to get to that number, you have to do some crazy gymnastics, financial gymnastics. You have to okay, we're not going to longer take corporate income tax here. We're going to cut a budget here. We're going to have this one tiny increase on the users of roads, and that is, who here owns an electric vehicle? Raise your hand.
Who here is going to pay more next year? Keep your hand up.
If you have a plug-in hybrid, raise your hand. Okay, you all, like the 5 of you, are going to actually pay more next year. If you own an EV, you're going to pay $100 more in your vehicle registration fee, otherwise known as the birthday tax. And if you own the plug-in hybrid, you're going to pay $50 more. And this was done to, House Republicans insisted on this because they think that EVs aren't paying their fair share in taxes. Even though there already is an existing 10-year-old EV surcharge that was charged, it's called like the gas fee, essentially, for not paying gas taxes. So this is the only user fee. This is what makes this whole road funding plan completely different than anything that's ever been implemented in the state of Michigan's history, is that for 100 years, we just charged the users of the roads for the roads. Now we are like, 2015, we started earmarking just general fund revenue, which is essentially just as regular income tax money to a little piece of it, $600 million a year, goes into a road fund of about $5 billion or so that gets distributed between MDOT and all the various agencies. Now, to get to this $1.8 billion additional, we are going to start taxing pot smokers. We're going to start. We're going to try to basically divert more income out of the general fund, and really just.
If you're a high-income earner who smokes pot and drives an EV, just
you're getting screwed.
Yeah, you're.
Yeah,
it's on you, Bell. It's on you, pal.
So yeah, I joked. I was like, "Boy, this is really hitting Ann Arbor hard." You know.
You're harsh and everyone's mellow.
That's why we're doing this in Grand Rapids.
Yes. So there's this little targeted tax increase, particularly because House Republicans thought and there's some groups that have looked at this and said, no, like right now, currently, the owners of all electric Silverados or F-150 Lightnings or the Mach-E, Ford Mach-E, or the Chevy Equinox EV, they're paying more than their gas cousin right now, and now we're going to tack on an extra $100 just to try to get to this. I mean, ultimately, this is just all part of the anti-EV agenda that has kind of swept the GOP, and they've been succeeding largely. They got rid of the tax credit at the federal level just a couple of weeks ago, and they are not slowing down. And as a result of it, General Motors the other day announced that they are going to lose $1.6 billion of money that they've put into factories for EV production. Literally just took $1.6 billion and set it on fire, and it's lost. And $1.6 billion, watch for this number, is the equivalent of $32,000 for every General Motors employee in the state of Michigan. This year, the start of this year, General Motors employees got the biggest bonus ever, almost $18,000. That is bass boat money. They are not getting bass boat money next year. They are getting like Christmas wreath money. I mean, it is going to be a significantly lower. Now, I know there's not a lot of General Motors employees here in Kent County, but this is gigantic in Southeast Michigan. This will actually affect up north real estate. It will actually affect tourism on the west side of the state, because those General Motors employees are so used to that. Getting a bonus of some sort, and it has been really good for the last 10 years, and it's going to be probably closer to zero next year, and people are going to feel it. So anyway,
in southeast and mid Michigan, which also has some big GM plants and big car plants, that there are Christmas ads for furniture sales, actually car sales, that basically say you can come and spend your winter bonus on a wide variety of things.
Full disclosure, they keep me employed, so newspapers ads.
Let's look ahead, and let's do a little, rather than it's just politics, it's just policy here, because Chad, I think you bring up
I'm going.
Grab yourself another drink. I think you bring up a really important point, not just about sort of this cliff that we're looking to. But because of the federal stimulus dollars from years ago, when Joe Biden was president and during COVID, the state, had a $9 billion surplus a few years ago. And just to put that into context, like when I first started covering the Capitol, our general fund was like $11 billion. Now, I'm not talking like altogether, I think it was like $56 billion, but just the general fund of kind of spending money, right? And we're talking about a $9 billion surplus. And so we're going to have to start seeing a smaller and smaller state government, or, to Chad's point, taxes are going to have to increase or something's going to happen. Meantime, at the very beginning, we were talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is, by all estimations, going to pull at least $1 billion out of the state budget in the coming year. And economists are looking at Michigan next year and going, yeah, things aren't as rosy. It feels like something, like, are people in Lansing preparing? It doesn't feel like something we're talking a lot about. And is it because it's just election year and some folks are like, okay, bye, see ya? Like, what's the plan?
I don't think that Lansing is prepared for a period of budget austerity. I mean, they're just not used to it. It doesn't mean that people aren't already thinking about it, but I mean, it's putting together a budget is about the dollars that you think you have, not the dollars that you have, but what's your projected revenue going to be? What are your wishes? What can you get through a political system? And a lot of it is muscle memory. And then when things suddenly change, those mindsets don't change as quickly. And I don't mean that as an indictment about politics. I mean that as an indictment on human nature.
Sure.
Yeah, there is a increase, even with the changes to term limits, which is noticeably changing how fast the turnover in the legislature is. So now you can be elected to the House, and you can actually be reelected to the House for 6 terms, 2 years each, rather than just 3 terms of 2 years each, and then you got to go to the Senate and do 2 years or 2 terms of 4. But if you can make it to the Senate, now you can. Or
you can start in the Senate, and then you could go to the House and do a term. And
people literally were doing that math when this was passed.
Yeah. They're still jumping around and using up their shot clock time essentially. but it is created a little more stability. And you watch the way Matt Hall has operated. He has operated like he intends to be Speaker for 6 years, because that's how much time he has on the clock. And he has made it clear that if they don't do deals with me, I'm going to wait them out. That's what he has literally said.
He said at the press conference 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to be Speaker for another 5 years, so they're going to have to figure out how to do budget deals with me.
I mean, Rick can attest to this, having been in Lansing much longer than Zoe and I. There hasn't been someone as confident in themselves as Matt Hall in the last 30 years, right?
I have thought about that, and I think you would have to go back to Senate Majority Leader John Engler and House Speaker Gary Owen, which is pre-term limits.
1988.
That was when I started in Lansing, and that this is pre-term limits, and these were people who had a lot of experience and a lot of confidence and a lot of control over things like campaign funds. That sort of power has dissipated since then for a wide variety of reasons, and I would put him almost in a category like that.
I was going to say about budgets, about how prepared are we for the cliff here. We do have like $3 billion in excess in 2 different rainy day funds, and that's good, because compared to 2011, when Rick Snyder came into office, there was $35 million in the rainy day fund. It's like the equivalent of running state government for like 7 hours or something like that. And
the rainy day fund for the state pretty much, almost always would last about a day. That's hyperbole, but the point being, it's like it seems like a mountain of money as you're putting it in there, and governors and political leaders, they brag about how much money is in the rainy day fund, and then the storm hits and it goes quick.
But Rick Snyder was adamant that he was going to put money away.
Yeah, and Rick Snyder, he used to talk about all the time, if you're governor in 2038, is that what
that's your Rick Snyder impersonation?
Yeah, 2038, it's going to be a great year to be governor because we'll be debt free. Well, we've started to kind of go backwards on that. First, there's the road credit card debt, but also there's been tinkering with the MIPSR system for the retirement system for public and school employees. This budget cut $100 million out, and instead just told schools, you're going to have to just absorb a rate increase. So
well, the argument was that you're getting a lot more in the per pupil foundation allowance, and so you've got a lot more. So you've got more money that you could put into the public school employee retirement fund, and the public school employees are looking at that and doing the math and going, no.
Yeah, and so you're just essentially washing the money through the school district, and they're not going to have any more money when they're paying a higher debt. But the preparedness, all the talk and bluster about we're cutting government and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But there wasn't really that deep of cuts in this thing. And of course, at the last minute, as we've seen in the last 5 years or so, there was a lot of pet projects thrown right in at the last minute. And at the Detroit News, we have been documenting these things because back on June 30th, 2022, the legislature introduced a budget bill, amended budget bill, where there was suddenly a magical $1 billion for all kinds of projects for the state government. We've documented a couple that are now the subject of criminal investigations. One's already been charged, and there might be more coming. But honestly, trying to document this stuff and find out, get the receipts from state agencies and how the money is being spent is turning out to be one of the biggest missions of my journalism career at this point. And because there's no one else watching it, and the oversight of state agencies is flimsy at best, and the legislature as well. And what we saw here in the last few days, Matt Hall tried to play this a little bit. He back in the spring, he made legislators put all their good wish lists out on a public website. It was $3 billion of stuff. I mean, no more than $200 million of it ended up in the budget. The Senate refused to do this. They went along, they did nothing. They just refused to do this. And then Hall basically said, I'm not doing a budget deal until you put your cards down out in the public and you hold at least one hearing. So the day after we had missed the budget deadline, and we had to pass a 1 week budget, essentially extension, the so-called continuing resolution, essentially, which is what Congress has lived off of for the last decade. For the first time ever, we passed a 1 week budget, and the Senate started disclosing all the things they want. And the Senate Majority Leader, Winnie Brinks, Democrat from this town, discloses that she wants $100 million for a program that's been established in Flint called Flint RX Kids, which gives new moms like a guaranteed income of $1,500 a month to help them stay out of poverty. Really well, regarded program in Flint, run and founded by Dr. Mona Hanna, the pediatrician who exposed the Flint water crisis. That was on Wednesday. On Friday, it became $250 million. And we've raised the question, okay, how does something go from 100, from zero? Senate passed their budget in May. They didn't put this in the budget then. And then it's $100 million. And then 48 hours later, it's $250 million. Whatever you feel about the program and the goodwill of it, I'm not passing judgment on that. I am passing judgment on the process, that you can just ram some massive 9-figure appropriation into the budget in the last 48 hours, and nobody questions that process, because that's a feel-good program. There's been a lot of really suspicious stuff that has gotten into the budget. Private corporations, real estate developers. There's one that we've written about. The lady famously spent $4,500 on a coffee maker, and then paid herself $550,000 a year.
$11,000 for a flight to Budapest.
First class, yes. All kinds of other goodies It's essentially people have converted these grants, people with power, with access, that are close to the governor and the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader, have been walking into state government for the last 4 or 5 legislatures and just grabbing money in unbelievable amounts and getting grants, and no one is asking questions.
Well, no, that's not true, because
in the appropriations process,
right.
at least.
And what I will say, and I will say it for Chad, which is the people who are asking questions and started asking questions were the Detroit News. Chad, his team, Craig Mauger, and Beth LeBlanc, for folks who want to find out more. And really, every single day, they are uncovering news stories and just breaking news. And it's not about the breaking of the news, right? Like, ooh, we're first. It's literally finding out where your tax dollars are being spent in some just unbelievable ways. And so I just want to do a quick round of applause to Chad and his team of Craig and Beth. It has been just absolutely amazing and has fundamentally changed how folks are talking about earmarks and pork barrel spending in Lansing. It just has, and it's simply because of their reporting. And I would highly endorse everyone to check it out. Let's open it up to some questions, yeah? Let's see, who's got the mic? Kalali has the mic. Okay, so here, Rick, do you want to do the rules about
Oh, absolutely.
Mic? Okay.
Before you do it, don't reach for it. She has the mic. It's her mic. Hers. She doesn't want to let go of it, and you don't get to take it from her. She will hold it for you.
And Kalali's tough. Do not try to.
Don't mess with her.
No.
Do we all understand the rules?
So why don't you raise your hand? Why don't you say who you are and where you're from, and then ask your question. Oh, I don't think we can hear you. Well,
Yeah.
we can slightly hear you, but I want to make sure folks at home can. So let's give the mic one more second. And Marshall is allowed to hold the mic. Marshall,
Yeah.
it's Kalali and
It's
Marshall.
also Marshall's mic, yeah.
Are the ones who are allowed to.
We appreciate your patience.
Okay,
We'll hum a tune while we're
I'll
waiting.
ask my question. Chad, let's quickly talk about the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. That is, and I saw folks when I said the $11,000 airplane ticket, $4,500 coffee maker. I mean, these are real things. Like, we're not making this up. Can you give us the latest? Where do things stand with this $20 million grant to Fay Bay-Dune Global Link? The money has not been returned to the state.
It is not. The Attorney General, Nan Nessel, started a criminal investigation, publicly announced it a year ago. And usually when that happens, like, something is going to happen. Like, or they already have got some information. And so it all kind of blew out into the public on June 18th. We got a tip that there was a raid underway at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation office headquarters right on Washington Square in downtown Lansing. Highly unusual for the AG to send in agents to a state agency. And so
Unannounced.
An unscheduled accountability session is what I like to call it. And so that blew open, and then there was this like the agents went in with like recorders, and they recorded like the MEDC's attorney yelling at them, saying, "I'm going to get you. I'm going to have your law license," and it was just some really nasty lawyer on lawyer threats and stuff. And so then the MEDC turned around, went to court, and tried to get some of the things that were seized in the search warrant, computers and cell phones and records that were on this lawyer's desk, where there was literally in the transcript, "I don't have them," and they're like, it says right here, you have it on your desk, and so we're taking it with us. So they were trying to argue this is attorney-client privilege. You can't have access to this. So they were fighting this in court, and so in doing that, they had to spell out why they were fighting, and the AG's office was like, hold my Oberon. Let's put down the transcript and show everybody what was said in this raid. I mean, highly unusual for this to come out in a state investigation. Sometimes a federal investigation, but not. We just never seen anything like this. And let me tell you, also at the same time they were raiding Fay Bay-Dune's house in Farmington Hills. So all this court fight the AG's office or the MEDC, they don't want to fight this in Lansing, Ingham County Court, because there's a whole bunch of press that sits there every day and they can easily get to it. So they take this to the little district court in Farmington Hills, which has never ever had this kind of a case. And they've never had Beth LeBlanc, my colleague, in their face asking for documents. And
you don't want Beth in your face.
And so I mean,
She's actually very nice.
Craig and I both.
But you don't want her.
Yes. Craig Mauger and I also both dropped into the courthouse trying to obtain documents day after day until we finally got some of this stuff. But it is laid out this whole drama that's been going on around this criminal investigation. They made a settlement yesterday without telling us what's in the settlement. We'll find out eventually, but they have agreed to sort of put down their arms and not keep litigating this. But and at the same time, the AG's office and some of these court documents, they said that the CEO of the MEDC, an appointee effectively of the governor, a member of her cabinet, is a potential target of the investigation. They labeled this as investigation an embezzlement investigation. So that is about the extent of what we know about where it is right now. But what it is kind of laying bare is that you had someone who came in, politically connected, donor and appointee of the governor on the MEDC governing board, used that position to lobby and get money secured under the pretense it was going to go to the American Arab Chamber of Commerce, of which she was the executive director of. And then they got the language labeled in a way that she was able to turn around, create a whole new organization that didn't exist in the day that the money was passed, and then go to the state budget office and turn in a one-page piece of paper to claim her $20 million. I'm not kidding. This is actually what happened. And what we started doing was we started asking the state budget office, we want every single one-pager that comes in your office as it comes. And we started collecting these things. And finally, because we were like, what is this $20 million for this international business incubator? That's literally how it's described in the state budget. Finally, in March of 2023, a budget is passed on June 30th, 2022. March 2023, we get the one-pager. And the one-pager tells us what this group, who's behind this group. We call the group, Faye Beydoun has just left their organization, has just abruptly quit and not explained why. And then we tell the chairman, well, Faye Beydoun got this money. And the chairman of the organization was like, oh, we didn't know that. We thought we were getting the money. So anyways, we break this whole story about how this very savvy operator went into the state government and got $20 million. And then like a year later, we finally get the receipts.
Maybe almost savvy, since it does seem like she got caught.
Well, a year later, we started using the Freedom of Information Act to request the receipts. They had to turn in these agencies. MEDC is the agency that administers these grants because the legislature says they're going to go through the MEDC. They have these basic reporting requirements. You have to turn in receipts, essentially. And we started asking for receipts, and that's where we found the $4,500 Jura coffee maker. Has anybody got one of those? I've not had coffee from
But that coffee maker kind of became, like, you just spun out this labyrinthine tale of how it played out. But the coffee maker became sort of emblematic of the abuse.
Of tax dollars being spent, right? Because all of this is tax dollars. And now the legal fight is your tax dollars now in court.
And then on top of that, this March, after a year of reporting about this, the MEDC says, okay, we're canceling the grant because you're violating it. We think you've misused the money. We think you're taking an exorbitant salary. And they were also, like, Faye had basically was operating this nonprofit with no board, which is a violation of nonprofit law. And guess what? We're finding a bunch of other nonprofits running without boards right now. And it's very, very curious.
Up your subscription to the Detroit News.
Forward, promote.
I was on the phone with Beth for half an hour on the way over here, just talking out multiple other entities that have gotten money in the state budget that are operating without boards. So it kind of raises the question. Okay, MEDC, you dropped one. Who else you drop in next? If you're going to enforce the law fairly, and Faye Baydoun would probably want to argue that they froze her accounts. But she initially, I mean, this whole tale, she told the governor, I'll shut it down. And then she just kept spending, and then we did a story 6 months later, and 6 months after she had told the governor in a letter, I'll shut it down, she spent another $700,000. And she basically had claimed the first $10 million and was trying to get access to the second $10 million before they stopped it. But then they said, would you please kindly repay the $8 million you haven't spent, or at least that we don't know that you've spent, and she has not paid that back. And then last week I caught the governor at an event and asked her about some other things, because as soon as we wrote about the $20 million and how Faye took off of it essentially and left the Arab Chamber, we found out from from some of the various documents we've obtained that the governor's chief of staff personally went to Dearborn one day and apologized to the American Arab Chamber and said we didn't know
The people who were supposed to get the grant in the first place.
Yeah, we didn't know she was supposed to get this money, or she was going to get. We didn't know this was how it was going to work out, and that is a very, very curious thing for a chief of staff who is a pretty quiet, behind-the-scenes operator, and also just is that really true? I think is an unanswered question, and I'm in the trust but verify business. I trust what you tell me, but I'm going to verify. I do this to my 13-year-old daughter. By the way, I just want to shout out to Madison, my 13-year-old daughter. This is her birthday today.
Maddie!
And you're here?
Birthday, Madison! Madison!
Oh, that's right. She's with her friend. She doesn't want to be
Madison is not 13. Madison is still 6 years old. That is not.
Rick and Zoe have been watching her. I mean, Rick and I used to live across the street, so Rick's been watching her grow up.
Oh my goodness!
from
Happy
the
birthday,
start.
Maddie. Okay,
Well,
let's open it up to some questions. I think we've got the mic
starting
working.
there, we've
Yes.
got- yeah.
Okay.
My name is Mary Lee Vandenhavel. I'm from Lowell. Of the 430, is $1 billion that is expected to be from the cannabis tax?
Million.
420 million.
Okay. Is that based on current sales?
I believe so. I mean, that's what the fiscal agencies of the House
It's a
and Senate-
projection.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
they're not always right.
But there is a large amount of business that's done along the Ohio-Indiana borders, and people come from Chicago to buy weed because it's so cheap in Michigan.
Yeah.
It's not going to be so cheap anymore. So that 430 million is probably a low estimate.
That's one of the arguments that's been made against the tax. And obviously, you know, that you've got a market. When you create a new expense in that market, well, that disturbs the market, and you don't know exactly how it's going to play out. But that's certainly one of the arguments. I mean, another thing too is it's no secret that Michigan's marijuana market is saturated with businesses. It's not possible for all of them to survive. And that would be true with or without this tax. Is this tax going to accelerate the demise of some of the weaker players? Probably.
Oh, that raises an interesting little development that happened today. The Senate Regulatory Affairs Committee held a hearing on a bill to cap the number of retail licenses. Out of nowhere, after we slap this big tax on this industry, we're going to want to cap the retail. I mean, I'm sure this was, I will go out on a limb in here and say votes were obtained for this tax increase under the understanding, the horse trade, that they would cap the number of retail licenses to stop new players from entering the market and to essentially protect the current
The existing
players.
businesses.
And the Senate, I believe the Senate Fiscal Agency said this is actually protectionism, essentially. It could set up regional monopolies. And so this will be an interesting thing to watch. I mean, there already are
they're
some
actually
big
limiting-
players in the business. I mean, if anybody's ever been in a Loom store, it's like the Apple of marijuana stores. So there are players that are trying to essentially gobble up business, and this will be something to watch here.
Yeah.
But just
Okay.
one of the interesting little twists of that is, which what you were saying about the monopolies is part of what they're trying to do is set up instances where, in places where there isn't one, you could approve, the regulating agency could approve one license for a particular region where there isn't one right now, limit them in ones where they're existing, already. And so, that's exactly the sort of stuff that you were talking about. So if you live in a small town that doesn't have a marijuana shop, then get your license application in. Actually, never mind, you're too late.
Okay, next question.
Hi, I was wondering about the funding for public schools and libraries and MIPSers and the shifting, when they shift the funds from those public entities, does it come with an IOU? So it's due to come back, at least come back hopefully with interest within a given specified period of time.
Well, so let's sort of set the table with what we're talking about. So there's, as Chad talked about, there is basically this retirement fund for Michigan educators that the state is meant to pay into, right? So it's a retirement fund. The state is meant to pay into it. What happened was, as part of this latest school ed budget, which education, the K through 12 communities were already incredibly unhappy with because of how late it was. It was supposed to be done July 1st when their fiscal years began. Instead, it came after October 1st. But so what they did is there is now per pupil funding, what lawmakers and what the governor will say is record funding, the highest that's ever been spent per pupil, per student, $10,050.
Which is literally true.
That is
Yes.
record amount. However, with that, they said, but school districts, you're on the hook for paying $100 million into this retirement fund that normally the state would. The entire It's Just Politics show today, well, not the entire, but most of it was with the executive director of the K-12 Alliance explaining just this, right? That you can, in theory, you can absolutely say it's the most per student, but, I could give you $100 and that's the most money I've ever given you, except with the rub that 50 of that or 70 of that or however much
You
actually have to
to
give
someone
else.
I owe money to.
Exactly. So it's a bit of a shell game, and what we talked with Robert McCann, again, the executive director, is his concern that more and more this is sort of becoming the norm. And to Chad's point too, the same with road funding, that what we're seeing with these state budgets, it's where it used to be sort of dedicated funds for dedicated things, there's a lot of, well, let's move this money over here, and then this money can be funneled over here, and then to your point earlier, as we were talking about, and this amount of money is going to give us this much revenue based on these projections, which in all likelihood are just not the most clear projections or transparent. Okay, let's keep
In
going.
other words, you're still goring someone's ox.
Yeah, okay.
Although in fairness, I mean, every budget sets priorities. There are winners and losers.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, so bear with me. I'm not a big fan of talking in front of a bunch of people, but
No worries, you're in a safe space.
there's two things, as I'm a millennial and people younger than us, that I have thought deeply about. This is how Lansing is doing, correct? So I see the trickle down of federal government into Lansing. There's two things that I think about are what of all this is more staying in power or getting a salary for the rest of your life as opposed to your constituents versus the state of my mind, and people younger than me that I talk to and people that I manage at my workplace are more of doom and gloom. Like, what's the end state of my life? Is Social Security going to be around? Am I looking forward to anything? Because if anything, what we see and what I think my younger generation see is we're kind of, excuse my language, fucked from the government, and we're going to have to deal with it. Like, it's just doom and gloom from what I see. So how does that trickle down from what you're getting from federal government down to Lansing?
Well, you first, I don't think you said your name when you first started.
My name is Dan.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for sharing that. I think a lot of folks, whether they feel that intrinsically or not, know someone, particularly like you said, that's younger, who feels like, and with good reason, their dollar doesn't go as far as it did 20 years ago. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And what are the systems and the institutions that for so long felt fair, that don't necessarily feel fair? I think what your question though is about, how has the federal government or frustration about the federal government sort of impacted that same frustration in Lansing? Is that?
Do
Yeah.
you mean, you're saying that I'm just repeating it for the people who can't hear you, that there's a trickle-down effect of what's happening in DC to what's happening in Lansing, which falls down to citizens. Are you talking about the money, or are you talking about just a political
I'm
activity?
talking political, Democrat, Republican, whatever. There's a bleed that goes into Lansing, that goes into how we're feeling at this moment
Yeah,
of
sure.
what I see. So like, it has nothing to do with policy. It has nothing to do with anything. It's just a general bleak thing that I'm seeing with my age and younger of like, how does, yeah, yeah, it has nothing to do with anything left or right. It's literally, this is just how we're feeling, and it has to come from the top.
Yeah, I don't, I would love to offer some answer, but I think maybe there isn't an answer. And instead what there is a lot of folks, and for folks who are watching at home, what you can't see is a lot of folks who are just nodding and going, yeah, that there is this sense right now of deep frustration at government, at institutions. Survey and polling shows that, and it shows that even to your point with younger generations who feel like the system is either rigged or that the system only keeps those who are in power further in power, or the wealthy wealthier. And the fact is that when you look at data about how much money the top wealthiest folks are making, I mean, the data back it up, right? So it's not it's not surprising that folks would start to feel frustrated about that. I think there's
You're not alone.
right.
You're not alone in that.
And I think there's also this thing that wasn't around decades ago, which is social media and the brevity at which information is passed in a way that really I don't know our human brains are capable of taking in as much information, and at many times disinformation and inaccurate information. It's a lot to take in, and I don't know that as a society we're fundamentally equipped right now with the skills to manage it, and then to add the political violence that we've seen. What I will say though, Dan, is like, my goodness, you showed up tonight to talk about politics with your community. And I guess what I'd like to believe is like folks in this room, and I'd like to think that throughout the country, maybe there's some other community sessions or meetings right now where people are listening to each other, where we can disagree without being disagreeable, where we can just start to have some of these conversations together and create a little bit more of a community.
The social media thing, it's a generational gap. It is things that we're going to, like, sorry, older folks are going to have to deal with. This is just a part of what we have to deal with. But that's not an excuse for Republicans or Democrats to not foresee, and maybe you guys do, what's coming in the next generations, but I don't know. Call this griping. It's just, it's hard to be a kid, or a 35-year-old kid, I guess, at my age, and just see the doom and gloom. So
Yeah.
God, I hope something's happening to address it. And I don't think social media, I don't think things that our kids are doing now,
Yeah.
and our youngins are doing now, and I
Yeah.
am doing now,
Yeah.
has to be something that has to do with that. It
Yeah.
has to be
Let me
adapt
give you
to something.
let me give you one little, like, I don't want to say piece of advice, but let me just say one thing, and then I want to keep it moving with people asking questions. Is one of the things that you don't need to apologize. We're all here. You've got the mic. One of the things I do want to say, and I'm talking specifically about Lansing. Your voice, this is going to sound super hokey, but I'm going to say your voice actually does have power. Like Dan, yours personally by yourself, okay, maybe not. Like, you individually. But the collective folks, I have talked to lawmakers who fundamentally will say, I changed my vote, I changed my mind because people kept calling my office. You would be shocked how many people actually don't. You would be shocked because so much of the attention, and this is one of the things why Rick and I love to do It's Just Politics, because we really just try to focus on Lansing and Michigan. So much has become nationalized, right? And it feels very far away, and then it feels like, how can I even make impact in my congressional delegation? But here in Lansing, the issues that we're talking about the MEDC, about wholesale marijuana tax, those are things that you could just drive to Lansing and go talk to your lawmaker about. And I promise you, if 1,000 people did that in Lansing every single day, it would change things. It just would. 1,000 people are not in Lansing every single day making their voices heard. Maybe 10 or 12 on the Capitol lawn on a Tuesday when the legislature is in session. So if there's one takeaway, let me just say Lansing isn't all that big. It's kind of like high school meets summer camp with a lot of policy nerds. You actually all together could, gather some friends, make some noise. Joe Spalding is doing that. Whether you agree with what he and Rank My Choice Vote is doing right now, they're showing up. They've got T-shirts here. They're getting signatures on stuff. One more thing, and then really,
we got to move over there.
I love Issues and Nails. I've been an NPR fan my whole life. I love that you guys bring this stuff here. I just had to voice that. So.
Oh,
Thanks.
Oh, Dan, checks in the mail. Okay, let's keep going.
While she's moving over there, I was going to say that, in the offices, they keep track of how many phone calls they get about something. They keep track of emails. And it's, and they treat it like, polling. It's not
Flood the system,
scientifically stratified, but they'll say we got dozens of phone calls. Getting 100 phone calls on something would be amazing. So, if you're one of 12, you've probably made a difference.
The other thing is that these are 148 individuals who we've elected from all corners of the state to come and elect or to serve everyone. And yes, they're from an individual district, but some of the more powerful changes I've witnessed in state government and policy making has been when someone from two people from different far-flung corners of the state get together on an issue. And my favorite example is Tom Casperson was a state senator from Escanaba. He owned a logging company. And one day he got in kind of an argument with Bert Johnson, an African-American state senator from Highland Park. And Johnson said, you need to come ride buses in my district and see how my constituents live, how kids in my neighborhood get to school every day, and how long it takes. And so Tom Casperson did that, took him up on it, rode buses for 2 days, came back to Lansing and said, people shouldn't have to live like this. We gotta get serious about regional transit. They passed the Regional Transit Authority. Now that was 12 years ago. The Regional Transit Authority has been mostly ineffective ever since then. But that's not. Don't focus on that. We have a system in place. If we could ever get the political will in Southeast Michigan, we'd have something resembling bus rapid transit, which they have in this town well before Detroit was ever able to get it. But nonetheless, that was just a great example when someone gets involved in an issue that's not in their neighborhood. Really, mountains can move real fast in Lansing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, my name
And we
is.
need to go over there after that because you've been having your hand up for a while.
Okay, cool.
My name is Max. I'm from Lowell, Michigan as well.
Hi,
Hi,
Max.
Max.
My question is mostly for Chad. I know you mentioned it earlier on tonight about these ghost jobs that Republican legislatures were discussing. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that and discuss why they were seeking to eliminate these jobs or what they really are.
Yeah, so they're basically in the state budget. They're a full-time equivalent position. It's not necessarily an individual job. It could be multiple jobs part-time, but every department has a set number of FTEs within their budget, and they're tied to the amount of money in their budget, and the legislature can cut those FTEs if they so choose. And what they did was they took the FTEs, the unfilled FTEs. They get a report every quarter that says there's 100 jobs in MDOT that aren't filled right now. And they just renamed them ghost jobs. And it's just a PR political gimmick to.
It's a soundbite.
It's a soundbite just to say that this is somehow shady. Now, funny that I brought up ghost jobs and then I brought up Bert
And these
Johnson.
ghost employees weren't costing anyone
No,
anything.
they weren't costing any more money. This is unspent money. It's like any business that doesn't fill a job, and then they just absorb the cost, or they're in the middle of trying to cut costs because they don't want to lay off. Okay, we're not going to fill these jobs over here, and so we can preserve these jobs over here. That's what state government. They have 48,000 employees. And there was 3,000 at one point, basically in April, that were unfilled. Not unusual, but the House Republicans, very politically savvy move in renaming them ghost jobs. Now, funny, speaking of ghost jobs, I brought up Bert Johnson earlier. He's a state senator who actually did create a ghost job in his own office. He created a job for someone who didn't actually have it, and he collected $18,000 of additional cash because he needed to pay his son's tuition. He went to jail, back to prison for that. So that is an actual ghost job. The ones that Matt Hall and Republicans talk about all the time were not really quote-unquote ghosts.
I think quickly, and then let's go to the next question. It also is a little bit of this sort of Matt Hall taking a page from DC, right? And sort of this frustration and anger about federal workers right now, too, that somehow state employees, federal government workers are over-deserving or something like that. And so it was, like Boge and shrinking government, it was sort of the same with these state employees and what do they do all day and, what are they actually working on kind of thing. Okay, yeah.
And you have been so patient.
Hi, my name's Cassia, and my concern is about electricity infrastructure, in that economic growth is tied to that, and I have seen graphs where I see how much China is building out, and I know we have the data centers that are being talked a lot about, and we're all going to see increases. I recently signed a petition on DTE. Some issue escapes me at the moment, but I'm sure it is to rein in, their costs. What can you tell us about, how we're going to achieve economic growth in Michigan, given our lack of, developing things like electricity infrastructure?
Yeah.
Just the other day, I think it was Grand Rapids Press yesterday was saying how Michigan was one of, back in the 1950s was looked upon as very prosperous among the 50 states. And I don't know if you could say that today.
The data will say no, that we used to be in the top 10, we're not anymore. In terms of energy use, what we know is that we have an old grid, nowhere close to a smart technology or a smart grid. And we also know that the amount of energy that we are using right now is exponential because of things like AI and because of data centers like you talked about. And so it's one of the things that I've thought a lot about, where I keep going like, right, so what's the plan, right? I was talking earlier about just sort of the budget. We know we're at a funding cliff. What's the plan? Well, we know that we're not ready and we're not prepared. What's the plan? When you talk to folks like DTE or Consumers Energy, they say, we're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into new grid and new systems. You probably, I yell at, this is where we disclose that Rick and I are married. I yell at Rick because he starts the dishwasher between 3 and 7 in the afternoon during peak hours. And I'm like, we're not meant to do that. Not today.
Not today.
No, I think fundamentally, I don't have the answer for you. I know smart people are thinking and worried about it. I know there's dollars being spent to try to fix it. But I don't think, much like when we were talking about social media, I don't think that we are prepared fundamentally for the amount of energy use. And I think I know, because of folks I've talked to, that when these, when the systems were being built, no one was fathoming the kind of energy. And what's really unfortunate is that we were actually making pace for a while because of solar and wind and alternative energy and capabilities of storage. And now we have data centers and just massive amounts of energy use that's coming very quickly. And
Although we're
again,
not sure.
what's the plan?
Yeah, although we're not sure how much we want to, bank a big part of the state's economy in data centers, because there's a lot of disagreement that data centers on their own do consume a lot of power, but they don't create a lot of jobs. So,
The pyramid is a good example.
but
Yep.
but
Steelcase headquarters, yeah.
yeah, but the idea is that if a data center goes in somewhere, then maybe that will create a lot of businesses around it that want access to the services of a data center.
Yeah, we've got absolute whiplash on energy policy right now of historic proportions. So a year ago, we were plugging away as a nation that was going to be getting more and more clean energy. General Motors declared they weren't going to sell another gas car after 2035. That has completely changed. We are now going back to the gas. As I had mentioned earlier, we burned that $1.6 billion in GM's shareholder money simply because the President of the United States changed the policy overnight. And they're talking about pulling back $500 million grant that Biden gave to convert Lansing Grand River, the Cadillac plant, and I will call it the failing Cadillac plant. Is anybody here driving a Cadillac four-door sedan tonight? No, exactly. Did you 20 years ago?
Boy, you took a risk there, because you could have been embarrassed.
20 years ago, you might have, but you're not. You're not buying that. And so that plant is going to shut down. There's going to be 3,000 people without jobs in Lansing. And South Lansing is going to be in danger of looking like parts of Flint. I mean, that is not too far. That's not hyperbole. That is reality of the economy. If we don't find a new product for that car factory, boom, it goes. And we know what happens when a car factory leaves. And we have evidence with Flint itself and
The car plant that used to exist on the edge of the neighborhood that we live
in the west side neighborhood of Lansing, where there's just a big concrete jungle now from the old Fisher body plant. So when these plants go away, people go away, and all kinds of wealth goes away. And so on top of that, you have now an administration that is literally forcing consumers' energy to spend a couple $1 million a week to keep a coal plant operating in Ottawa County because they want to burn more coal. And so if you're the utilities, you are just pulling your hair out. You don't know what to do. You're going to have to turn around, and consumers is going to send us the bill. And the Public Service Commission is going to have almost no choice but to let them do it, because the federal government is holding a gun to the consumers' head to keep this one plant running. That's just one example. They're doing this every state in the union now. And then you got the solar developers who are trying to build out an infrastructure and build out more and more solar. Full disclosure, I am going to soon be running my dishwasher between 3 and 7 p.m. because I'm getting.
Are you getting solar
I'm
panels?
getting solar, and my wife will let me run the dishwasher.
Yay,
in the afternoon.
Kira.
But I just looked at it and said, okay, well, we need a tax write-off, and let's take advantage of let's take advantage of the law before one big beautiful bill takes that away, and people stop making that investment.
Yeah.
And you're going to see all these little companies that did solar. This guy I bought it off of, he has a diversified business, and he's in roofing and all kinds of other electrical work, because I wasn't confident just Joe Solar Company was going to be in business and to come maintain the thing in March or something. And so there's going to be just a big wave of problems in the energy sector while we have a new policy, and we might just turn it back. in 3 years? Who knows? It's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah.
And right now, state government hasn't backed down from their mandates of what the levels are. So DTE and consumers are plowing ahead, but that might mean that like their counterparts in Indiana are going to just be plowing lower and turning the coal plants back on. And then guess what? Indiana gets the car plant. Or Indiana gets the next big meta data center. And yeah, data centers are energy, water sucking fields of computers. But it's a big investment, and there's a number of workers that come in and maintain them and whatnot, and so it's a matter of like what do you want to play in essentially, and we're at a standstill on energy and economic development right now. I think in the state on the industrial side.
No, I think that's beautifully put, that what we're really seeing, and it's also in education policy, that what you talk to folks who have institutional knowledge in many of these issues say part of it is just the sort of 180 that we do with policy. That they will often say like, bad policy would be better than just this no policy.
Consistent
Or-
bad policy
Consistent
is
bad
better
policy.
than boomeranging between one or the other, which happens also when you've got big swings in political power.
Exactly. And what we have seen, and we didn't even get to election 2026, which is I know everyone is so excited already for another election to talk about, but really is going to be likely the biggest Michigan election in decades and decades and decades. We are going to have ballot initiatives that you're going to vote on. We are going to have an open gubernatorial seat, an open U.S. Senate seat at the same time as the governor's seat, attorney general, secretary of state, the entire state house, the entire state senate, your congressional delegation, plus you are actually going to vote. Right now, we know it is already on your ballot come November 2026, whether you want to call a constitutional convention. This is on your ballot every 16 years, automatically, whether you want to rewrite this whole sucker. So I think we're going to leave it here with just this point of like, and Dan, I'm going to take it back to you, man, which is like this idea that everything we've talked about tonight, it can feel powerless and so frustrating, but actually you individually do have a lot of power yourself, and also getting others in your community involved going into an election that is going to just have massive amounts of effect on your future and your kids' future here in the state. I want to say thank you to everyone so much for coming out tonight. Thank you to everyone who joined us virtually. And let me just do a very quick plug. We tend to like to be the ones making the headlines. We like to not be the ones in the headlines, but you've likely heard by now that in all of this change, Michigan Public lost $1 million over the next 2 years, this year and next for our fiscal year. Public media as a system, $1.1 billion just gone. Not like we don't get competitive grants, it's just gone out of the system. We are absolutely committed to making sure that this independent journalism is in all of our communities, but we really cannot do it without you. We keep these events for free. So this is my little plug, that one of the things you can do to be impactful in your community and make sure that conversations like this happen is to give. And MichiganPublic.org is the place. And also renew, if you haven't, your subscription to the Detroit News so that you can get all of the latest on the Michigan Economic Development Corporation from Chad and his team. Thanks, Chad. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a great night.
Thanks for coming out.
And my guess is Chad will hang around for a little bit if you've got more questions. Shit, there was something I wanted to ask you about that you said. You and Beth were on the phone for half